welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time, I always like to say welcome. If you're a returning viewer or you're a subscriber to the channel, super excited to have you here. Thank you for supporting the channel. Today I'm going to be quick, as I always say, and I'm going to be answering the question, how do you fund your LLM? How do people do it? Because it can be really expensive. So I am happy to talk about that topic and spill all the juice about funding your LLM in the US. Let's jump right on it. So, before I say anything about funding your master's in the LLM, please know that I am not a financial advisor. I don't have any background in finance. I am not even a finance attorney. So please bear that in mind. I'm only going to be sharing what I know based on my experience and experience of folks that I have talked to. So let's talk about some things. First things first. What's the average cost of an LLM in the US? I would say within the range of 30,000. I wanted to say 100,000. Sorry guys, sorry, my bad. From $30,000 and above, I think you would get a master's here in the US, right? And so there are schools that give part scholarships and all that. I'm going to talk about that later down in this episode, but just know that that's your average range. From 30,000, it can really go high. For the Ivy League schools, it's higher unless you get a scholarship. Bear that in mind. Now, I always get the question of, okay, so once I come to the US, I'll start working and I'll pay for my master's. I don't know if that is possible. I don't think you can pay for your master's from the money you make while working as a student, because if you've checked out my CPT videos or any of my OPT videos on work authorization, you would know that typically you come here, you have only 1 year, and then getting CPT authorization can be crazy unless you extend your program. And so it's a bit complicated for you to work outside of campus, right? For you to work outside of campus and make like good money for you to pay your tuition, you most likely be working on campus. That's typically what happens. And with what you make on campus, boy, you better use that money to feed yourself and pay your rent. Because if you're thinking of using that money to pay tuition as well, I don't know what job is that. Please, can you recommend it to me? Because I would want to, recommend some folks to a school that can pay you as high as that. But typically that's not the way it goes, right? So please just bear that in mind. If your plan is, when I come here, I'll work, and then whatever I work, I'll use to pay. Yes, you'll be able to work on campus or maybe outside of campus if you have the requisite authorization, but I don't think it's enough for you to pay your feeding, your rent, and then pay that as well, right? So that's my estimate. So now let's talk about scholarships, right? So in the US, what happens is that generally a lot of US schools actually give scholarships. But in my opinion, and based on my experience, there are folks who have gotten full scholarships, I'm sure. But my experience has been that it's usually been part scholarship. So let's say the tuition is $30-something thousand and the school will give you like an $18,000 waiver or a $20,000 waiver or even more. I interviewed Joshua, who told us that he got an 80% waiver, right? It could be as high as that, and there are schools that are higher, but typically a lot of times it's not full, right? So there are two types of scholarships, I would say. There's the scholarship that the school gives you, and then there are external scholarships. The school scholarships are those ones that are provided by the school, but for the external scholarships, it's usually by external parties and things like that. So if you're lucky, you can find external scholarships that are fully paid. I just want you to know that a lot of times, the schools will give you part scholarships. Now, there are schools that will give you very insubstantial sums, like they'll give you for a tuition of, so this is my experience. I got into an Ivy League school, right? I got into an Ivy League school, and then the tuition was about $60,000, and then I got a tuition waiver of $5,000, and in my mind I was like, what's that supposed to do? Like, how does that help me? You should not have given me the scholarship at all. Right? So for those schools like that for me wasn't feasible, so I went with another option where I got a more substantial scholarship. But what's my point? Just so that you know the types of scholarships that are out there, right? So what I always advise is that in addition to applying for school scholarships, also look for external scholarships, right? And those scholarships sometimes can cover your full tuition. They can give you stipends, cover your feeding and your rent and things like that. So look out for those scholarships. I interviewed Mame Efua, and I'm going to upload that video or that interview very soon. She's someone who got a full scholarship, and she's going to talk about that scholarship and how she supports students in finding those opportunities. So please watch out for that episode. But yes, this is one way of funding your master's with a scholarship. Okay, so another way of funding your LLM is by getting a loan. And now let's talk about that, right? So there are the federal student loans, and those loans are typically for citizens and permanent residents. So if you're not a citizen or if you're not a permanent resident, I think they are typically called FAFSA. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. I will provide links and descriptions to that so that you know what I'm talking about exactly. But those loans are typically for those financial aids and resources are typically for citizens and permanent residents, I think. But I'm not talking about any of those. I'm talking about private loans, right? There are companies and banks that can provide support with you getting loans and that will help you pay your tuition. Now, before I go into this, I want to repeat myself and say again, I am not a financial advisor. I am only giving you sharing information with you based on the experience of other students and myself. So what those loans look like is that you go to these facilities or these companies and then they help you. You apply for the loans. Make sure you don't apply for more than you need. Don't be greedy because you have to pay the money back. So let me start with that point, right? Do a proper estimation of what you need. There are folks who come here and are unable to pay for anything. So if you need to cover your tuition, your rent and your feeding, that can all be covered under the loan. So you apply for the loan and then the company or the bank will pay those loans to your school, and then if there's any balance it goes to you, right? So it depends. The term could be maybe 5 to 15 years and the interest rate varies, right? Pay attention to the terms of the loan agreement. Something else I want to mention at this point is about the term. It could be from 5 years to 15 years to pay back. Some institutions will require you to start paying back while you're in school. Some might say maybe 6 months after you're done with school. Some might say immediately you're done with school. Pay attention to the terms and look for what works for you. There are typically two types of loans I've heard out there. There's the co-signed loans, and I've heard that those loans are typically with lower interest rates and they are more favorable. But these loans require that a permanent resident or a US citizen co-signs those loans with you. And then there's the non-co-signed loans that are typically with higher rates. So I hear, please fact check, please do your research. But so I hear that these loans are more expensive just because you're the one, you probably don't have any backing. It's just you. There's more risk for these financial institutions, and it's just more expensive. I'll give you a few examples of organizations or financial institutions that I know that are providing these loans to international students, and it's in my time it was really hard, or at least it was harder for us to see financial institutions that were providing that support, that loan support to international students. At least it was difficult for me to see. But right now I know of organizations, financial institutions like Citizens Bank, right? I know of Empower and I know of Prodigy, right? So I will provide links to this in the description box. If you're thinking of funding your LLM, if you're already here in the US, which is typically the case, people are like, I'm going to take a leap of faith and I come here, and you're like, okay, how do I actually fund this? These are financial institutions that I know of. Please, this is not funded. This is not a sponsored ad. I've asked people questions about how they funded their LLM, and this is what they've told me. You can check these institutions out, find out what their terms are. If you have someone that can co-sign with you, I hear it's more affordable at more affordable rates and it's more favorable terms, so I hear. But please reach out to these institutions if you need funding. What I would say before I put this to a close is, if money and if financing your tuition or paying for your tuition is a consideration for you, it's therefore very important that you're proactive about looking for scholarships, and that you're also looking at the programs you're applying to. The affordability of the school is clearly something that should be your priority. So please look out for those, right? If you're not getting a substantial amount of scholarships, I don't see why you should be going for a school that gives you only like a 5,000 tuition waiver and then you have to borrow that huge amount from a financial institution. I will tell you, in my opinion, I will tell you, wait and apply again next year rather than carry that financial burden through a financial institution, right? So please think about these things. They're very important so that you don't overly overwhelm yourself in the end. Right, so thank you so much for checking this episode out. I hope I provided support. I'll provide those links to those financial institutions. I do hope this was useful for you. Thank you so much for checking us out. Have a wonderful day until we see you on the next episode. Peace out.